Hey YouTube, and welcome back to the Fantasy Football Profits. As always, we thank you guys so much for being here. We're excited. This is a video that I think has just been long overdue. We haven't done a fantastic job of talking about the deep running backs, right? And that's where money is made. This is how championship teams are built. Anyone can go out and draft Todd Gurley. It's not just drafting good running backs, which is part of our philosophy. We really focus on running backs, but it's being able to find good running backs later and in the middle of the draft. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to do our late running backs rankings video. Now this is very different video. Rob, do you want to explain why we're not doing this in the same typical structure?
Yeah, okay, so it's really impressive when you go to a website or if you go to a YouTube channel, whatever it is, and they talk about the rankings and they give you 1 through 80 in order. That looks really impressive, right? But honestly, if you're looking at that, there is no value after about 30 or 40 deep. After that, there's way more value in understanding the picks and who they are and the value that they bring in terms of individual skill set. Is this a guy that's a sleeper? Or is this a guy that you need to handcuff, or is he a guy that you won't draft and maybe keep an eye on? Some of those things to understand, because we realize that after about 30 or 40, maybe 50 running backs deep, after that, those rankings are going to fluctuate week to week based on matchup, day to day in camp based on new information. So it's far better for us just to give you some food for thought that you can use to assess these guys, rather than give you a list of 80 in a row that's going to change a day later. Okay. The other thing I wanted to get to too is we're going to talk about the NFC today. But I think the AFC is far more interesting. I think there's a lot more running back situations that are open for deep conversation, so I can't wait to do that video.
Exactly. So what we're doing today is we're not going to rank every player in order. We're going to talk about each team and the running backs on that team. For example, we're going to open with our team, the Vikings. And the running backs there and the value that they present. We're not going to give you guys a specific number. If you're looking for specific numbers and where guys are ranked, check out our website. They say feed a man a fish, or give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. That's what really matters here, guys. We're not just going to spit some numbers at you. We really want to give you the information that you need to succeed and help you to make fantasy decisions on your own. Because fantasy is no fun if you just find a website and do everything they do exactly, right? You guys are going to go off, you're going to do your own things. We're here to give you the tools that you need and give you the information. So that's what we're going to do. We divided up. We really wanted to focus. So this video today is just the NFC running back teams. So half of the NFL, and the next video that we do will be on the other half, will be the AFC. I'm a bit more excited for that. I can't help but feel that it's a bit more interesting to talk about.
Yeah, we're excited. Tonight is the really first preseason games, and so you're going to see information coming out a lot quicker now. There'll be injuries, they'll adjust depth charts, things like that. So we're excited. Football is here, everybody. This is the time to really begin to dig in and do your due diligence and study, and we're excited. What can we say out there? We'd love to hear your comments, subscribe, get the word out there. Also, we're going to send out a video tomorrow that's going to talk about the league that we're going to run, and there's a couple more slots open, not too many, but if you're interested, put it on this video and watch tomorrow for the video release in terms of the league that we're going to run with you guys out there. It's going to be fun to play with some of you that have been with us for the last 2 years.
Exactly. Let's just get right into it then. We're going to start with the NFC North. All right, so this is a fairly interesting division. As I said, we're going to start with the Minnesota Vikings. I guess, Rob, I'll just pass it off to you. What do you think of the running back situation? I think that we both agree, and just about everyone does, Latavius Murray and Dalvin Cook are the only two Minnesota running backs that have fantasy value right now. So those are the guys we're talking about.
Yeah, unless something drastically changes, those are the two guys you're going to keep your eye on. Beyond that, they don't have a lot of value at this point. The other thing I want to say in this video is we're not going to spend a lot of time on some of the top running backs like Ezekiel Elliott, things like that. You're not going to hear a lot of information because we've talked about them before. We'll just touch on them briefly, but we're going to try to get deeper. I want to talk about Dalvin Cook. Okay, so last year he was explosive before his injury, as we've talked about before. His yards per carry is 4.8. And 3 of the 4 games, his yards per carry is 5.6. He showed last year that this guy can be competitive and succeed at the NFL level. Obviously, he's very talented. He's right there in the top 15 running backs you need to consider. He showed he had good hands, instincts in the passing game. And I think the departure of Jerick McKinnon is going to ensure that he gets lots of targets there. I think that's going to be good. He was 3rd in the league in rushing going into week 3 before he tore his ACL, going into week 4, I should say. Now, one of the concerns coming out of college was that his lack of durability. Can this guy handle the wear and tear of the NFL? And of course, he goes out year 1 and he gets injured. And so that just reinforces everybody's big concern at this point. Although right now, it looks like he's ready for OTAs, he's ahead of recovery. Everything points to him being ready for week 1, so you definitely have to look at him. He's too good to pass on. Now, I'm not a huge handcuff guy. I try to stay from it. I'd rather have talent on my bench rather than a guy that I'm handcuffing just in case. But I would tell you right now, if you draft Dalvin Cook, you need to handcuff him with Latavius Murray. Now, the one thing I would say that I think bodes well for him is the addition of Kirk Cousins. Say what you want for Case Keenum. He did great last year, but I think Kirk Cousins is a better quarterback. I think that offense is going to do good this year. And so I want to move from Cook. If you have anything to add about Cook, but I want to move to his handcuff.
No, this is weird. I'm going to start with Murray and then go to Cook, if you're fine with that.
Yeah, go for it.
All right, so you can start with Murray then, and then I'll go from there, and then we'll go backwards, I guess.
Okay, so I look at Latavius Murray, right? Last 3 years, he saw a decrease in yards per carry. His production went from 5.1 to 4.0, 4.0 to 3.9. And he's also saw a corresponding decrease in catches last 2 years. Now, before Dalvin Cook got injured, he was only averaging 2.3 carries per game, so he really wasn't seeing the field much at that point. But here's what I think is going to happen this year, okay? The Vikings, they want to keep Cook healthy. Also, Jerick McKinnon's not there anymore, so I think they're going to play it safe this year. And I think it's easy to assume that in order to keep Dalvin Cook healthy, the Vikings are going to increase Murray's role. So it's not going to fall back. He's not going to go back the way he was where he's only getting 2 carries per game. Okay, that's not going to happen. They want to prevent overuse. They don't want to risk losing Dalvin Cook anymore. So I look at Latavius Murray. He is a backup. Obviously, that's where we see him at this point. But I expect he's going to get about maybe 150 carries this year. Now, that sounds like a lot of carries, but if you break that down, that's just barely over 9 carries per game. So when you look at him, that's not enough to make him anything more than a running back 4 who is touchdown dependent in what we call standard leagues. He has less value in PPR leagues. With that said, of course, if what's his name, Dalvin Cook gets hurt, then obviously right away he becomes a huge bonus there. In fact, if he gets hurt, I think he moves up into that running back conversation of a running back 3 at this point. That's where I look at Latavius Murray. So once again, he's a guy you're going to handcuff to Cook. I think he has some value. I think he needs to be on everybody's bench. But don't draft Latavius Murray expecting him to be a viable starter at this point.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree. Latavius Murray, as it goes for running backs, guys, how many running backs in the NFL can you say are a backup running back and still have some fantasy value? Well, Latavius Murray is one of the few. Over the last 3 years, every single season he has finished in the top 20 for touches and in the top 25 for fantasy points. He's very talented. Over the past 2 years, only one running back, Ezekiel Elliott, has scored more rushing touchdowns. Murray has had 20 rushing touchdowns the last 2 years combined. So he's a very good running back, and there's a reason I wanted to talk about Latavius Murray first, guys, and that's because I wanted to tell you those stats. Because those stats and that production is what, for me, keeps Dalvin Cook from being a late RB1, from being a low RB1 to an RB2, is the talent of Murray. Dalvin Cook is good, and I actually think he could be really surprise some people this year. Last year, he finished ninth among running backs for fantasy points through the first 4 weeks, which is impressive because he really only played 3 in like a quarter before getting hurt on that team that at the time was a mess and had a lot of issues bouncing between quarterbacks. But I think he could even increase his role this year because of Jerick McKinnon being basically the third down back. And because of Latavius Murray, Cook was only on the field for 64% of Vikings offensive snaps. So I think that number could easily go up to about 70 or 75%, which is very good news for him. So for me, Dalvin Cook is an RB2, a very solid RB2 option, and I really like Latavius Murray. As you said, good RB4 and a very good handcuff. Although I'm not a big handcuff fan, in that situation, you certainly have to do it. Let's talk about another team, though, now.
Before we get to that, side note, as we've been talking about how everyday things will change all the time. Now, last year the Vikings offense did pretty well. They put up some points. They ran the ball, like you said. Those guys on offense there, Cook and Murray, did fine. 2 years ago, that team was a mess. The offensive line had a lot of injuries, and they were just a mess. I think we lost 5 or 6 of our starting offensive linemen. No matter what we did, it just was a sinking ship there. They righted the ship last year, but right now today, new information came out. We look at our starting center, Pat Eflin. Looks like he's going to start the year on the PUP list. And now it looks like we might lost another offensive lineman for the year already. And so just something to keep an eye on there, because right now I like that situation. I like that offense. But I'm starting to be afraid that this goes back 2 years ago. We lose a couple more guys on the offensive line. Suddenly, that situation looks scary. But just wanted to give you that update on that information there. They have lost a couple guys right now. I get a little scared, have to admit, as a Vikings fan, a little nervous about that offensive line.
Yeah, you wonder when they just get to a point. Like, when are they just going to say, let's just put some first-round picks into it? Like, let's do something, right? Like, our defense was not necessarily the problem last year, but we spent a first-round pick on a cornerback. And I love the defensive focus, and I love the cornerback. Mike Hughes is a good corner, but man, I'd love to see some linemen on that team, that's for sure.
Yeah, and another thing we didn't talk about it, but I wonder the loss of our offensive line coach, who, of course, died of a heart attack. That's tragic. What effect that might have. And so those are just some side notes. Once again, I don't think they drastically change currently the draft level of Cook and Murray, but it is definitely something that we'll keep you abreast on as that situation develops as we get closer to the start of the season.
Exactly. That's to be good, you have to keep up with these little things, and that's what makes it so hard. That's what makes good fantasy players different from the great ones. So Let's move on now. What about the Packers? I think this is somewhat a two-man race. Everybody loves Ty Montgomery, but I think we'll both agree we're going to spend more time talking about Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones. Maybe we should just start with Ty Montgomery. Ty Montgomery's a good wide receiver. I think he's going to do a lot in the passing game, but I don't know how much he offers in the running game. And I know that last year we got a lot of hate for that, and a lot of people said he's going to be the back, and then, well, we ended up being right on that one, and I trust my instincts on this one again. He's just not an every down back, and he brings a lot of value to the passing game, so he'll definitely keep himself mixed in that way. But as far as running backs go, for me, it's Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones. So let's talk about them.
Yeah, I agree with you on the Ty Montgomery last year. A lot of people hated us for it. We just said we don't think he has the body and the makeup and the ability to be a back that's going to get the ball 15, 20 times a game on the ground. And sure enough, he proved that. He was injured, he's banged up, but he's a very skilled and gifted player. And I think with the loss of Jordy Nelson, you're right. I think he has value in PPR leagues. And I think that he'll get a lot of targets in the backfield as a wide receiver and like that. They're going to work him in definitely into that offense, but I don't see him as a viable running back option there. So let's go back to Aaron Jones and Williams. Like you said, to me, that's two guys that comes down to early on, people were really big on Williams. I think there's a shift there a little bit in the last month or so.
Yeah.
Right now, Aaron Rodgers has leapfrogged Williams as far as his average draft position goes. Or right now, Aaron Jones, I'm sorry.
I would hope that
Aaron
he is
Rodgers,
being drafted ahead
so
of
Aaron
Jamal
Jones
Williams.
is leapfrogged Williams in terms of his average draft position. And I think a lot of people are starting to get big on Jones at this point, even though he's going to be suspended for 2 games. And I think the reason why, and I would agree with that, is I like Aaron Jones. Of the 2 guys, I think he's the guy that's going to win that job in the end. Last year, he was by far the better running back. You look at Ty Montgomery, Williams, and Jones. Montgomery and Williams, the yards per carry is 3.6, 3.8. He had a robust 5.5 yards per carry. We talked about this earlier. What was his? You said his yards per carry in college were, and I don't remember the number, but
his senior year in college, he had a 7.7 yards per carry. I mean, I don't care how good the system was, how good the team was. That is also a product of Aaron Jones just being a good running back. He's a physical guy, and he's going to get every yard. In fact, last year he had a 2.21 yards after contact, which was 10th in the NFL, which is phenomenal news to go along with that 5.53 yards per carry. I mean, he's just a physical runner, and in my book, he's just the best running back on that team. I really think that he is.
Yeah, last year he got to be the starter, and he didn't do a lot of games, but in his limited role as a starter, he really thrived in that role. He had 2 games. During those 4 games that he started there, he had 19 carries, 125 yards. He had another game, had 17 carries, 131 yards, and during those same 4 games, he had 3 touchdowns. You look at during those same 4 games, he averaged 15.5 carries per game. I think he can do that. His ability to generate big runs to yards per carry was a league best 1.42. Okay, that's better than all Green Bay backs. In fact, that was better than all backs in the NFL. Now you look at Jamal Williams, that same statistic, he was a minus 0.48. So he really struggled there. It's just clear that Jones is the better running back. So that's the guy that I like at this point. Now, I think he's a bigger back, too. I think he's more physical, which he actually weighs a few less pounds than Williams and Ty Montgomery, but that's because he's only 5'9". At 5'9", he's a lot more big and physical. He's built more like a Marshawn Lynch, if you look at his body and his build there, so I think he can handle that. Last year, he had basically the same amount of statistics as Williams on the ground, yet he did with half as many carries. Now, the one concern, as we know, maybe you don't know, Aaron Jones is suspended for 2 games for an incident that happened. That does open the door a little bit for Williams to come in there. Maybe he can capitalize on that. But if you look at last year, he really only had 1 game, Williams, where he did well last year. Only 1 game where he had a yards per carry of over 4 during those games. If he thrived last year, for Williams, he thrived in the passing game. And beyond that, once again, he just didn't run the ball very effectively. And so when I look at the 2 backs for me, you got to look at Williams. He might have some value the first maybe 2 to 4 games. But I think when it's all said and done, the guy that I'd put my money on is Aaron Jones.
Yeah, exactly. We talk about guys who can surprise you, who maybe won't be fantastic. I think of Alex Collins. For me, Aaron Jones is like Alex Collins of this year.
Great comparison.
I think that's it right there. That's what we're looking at. Not a phenomenal season, but if you pick him, you can pick him fairly late, and I think he's going to have one of those types of seasons. So that's it for me, guys. Target Aaron Jones. We hate... I get it. Your suspensions make us nervous, and you hate to wait, and you hate to go a couple of weeks without a running back. But you know what? Come playoff time, I think he's going to be the guy, and I think you're going to be happy. I think he'll carry you a lot of other weeks. But let's move on to the Detroit Lions.
So the Detroit Lions. So there's a few guys to consider there. And so when we took a look at the Detroit Lions, I guess we'll start with LeGarrette Blount, obviously, at that point. Okay, LeGarrette Blount is brought in. He's a physical punishing runner. He's going to get a fair amount of carries at that point. I think he's a guy that's going to see most of the action on first and second downs. And I could see him finishing with about 850 rushing yards. And I think he starts the year as an RB3, is where I kind of see him at. Until Johnson moves up the depth charts. Now we look at Blunt. Blunt has much less value in PPR leagues there, definitely. I look at the other guys on the team. I look at Amir Abdullah. For me, he's a guy that I'm staying away from. You look at Blunt, you got Riddick there. They drafted Johnson. I think his days seem to be numbered. Last year's performance, a brutal 3.3 yards per carry. He does have some quickness. I think he's got value on third downs and passing situations, but he's had 3 years to win that job, and he just hasn't done it. I don't think he's going to either. I look at Theo Riddick there. Now, Theo Riddick, his role in that team is you're going to stay away from him in standard leagues, but in PPR leagues, he's a PPR stud. His catches per game average over 16 games is 71 catches per season. This guy gets a lot of action on the backfield. So I think he's an RB3 value in PPR leagues, nothing more. Now, I look at Kerryon Johnson. So Kerryon Johnson is a guy that I think is in a good situation. Now, what happens for a lot of rookie running backs, the reason why they don't see the field is because they're not good in pass protection. If you can't block in the NFL that throws the ball that much, you're not going to see action. Coach came out this week and said Johnson's been doing a very good job of understanding pass protection and picking that up. That bodes well for him. When I look at Blunt's 31 years old. He's not young anymore. He's a one-trick pony. Amir Abdullah is not the answer there. And so I take a look at Johnson. Johnson's a smaller back, but he's not small per se, but he's smaller. He's an aggressive runner with good acceleration. And I think he's going to win that job maybe later in the year. But really, when I look at Johnson, I think his best year is going to be 2019. So I'm not quite on Johnson this year. I think that Blunt's going to steal just enough carries away from him where he's going to devalue him a little bit. So this is what you would say is your prototypical. And this is kind of ugly. I hate to say this. I don't want to see anybody get hurt in the NFL. But the best thing for this running back situation was somebody being going down for the year. Because this is really going to play out very much like a running back by committee.
Yeah, exactly. So I wanted to, sometimes I like to keep myself focused. I just like to throw stats out there and talk. And I want to get, focused. And so I wrote a sentence for each running back situation I think best describes it. For example, for the Packers, because I think Aaron Jones is the guy, but you have to wait for the suspension, I put all good things to those who wait, right? That's a good reminder for me to focus on that. For the Lions, I wrote, it's like a New Year's resolution. Don't convince yourself it will happen, because it won't. And that's what I feel like. Don't commit too hard to any of these running backs, because honestly, there's too much going on there in a system that simply doesn't run the ball, and almost they don't want to. Their defense isn't great. They've got a good passing game. They throw the ball a lot. That's who they are. That's their identity. Don't expect that to change. So that's what I wrote. I completely agree with everything you said, Rob. I don't need to waste too much time telling you that none of these options are great.
Yeah, they're all guys you have to keep an eye on, because when at the end of the year, I tell you what, halfway through the season, owners are going to scramble to find any running back that's any viable option at all. So you definitely got to watch it, but don't get too excited.
Exactly. Let's move on to the Bears now. This is a far more clear and solidified running back situation right here. We're both on the same page, and I hope everybody else is. Jordan Howard is the guy, but how much is he the guy and how good is he? Let's talk about that. So before you say something, I guess I'll just go through this. One thing that I want to say about Jordan Howard. Let's not forget how good he's been in the past, how good he's been the last 2 years. Howard ranks 5th in the NFL in carries, 3rd in rushing yards, 8th in yards per carry, 9th in yards after contact, and 9th in fantasy points since entering the league. He has been very, very dominant, very, very productive. He's a guy that I admit I underestimated, and it's one of those things where you learn your lesson a little bit. So I think Jordan Howard's a fantastic option. What do you think about him?
Yeah, I love Jordan Howard. I think this guy is a stud. I know a lot of people last year, the first 2 weeks, Tariq Cohen came on the scene. He put up some good numbers. People were jacked up. People came out even on NFL stations saying this is a running back by committee. We went out there and said it is not. Don't let anybody fool you. This is not a running back by committee. Jordan Howard is the guy. He was the guy, and he still is the guy. This guy's been a stud. Just 23 years old. He's at 2,435 rushing yards in 2 years with 15 touchdowns. That's great numbers. It's even better if you consider the fact that he faces loaded boxes all the time. In 2017, he was second behind only Leonard Fournette in 8-met boxes he faced. 43% of his carries, he faced loaded boxes. That's insane, right? 2016 as a rookie, no rookie running back forced more missed tackles than he did. You look at, he was voted in the top 50 by other NFL players as far as his talent level. That's huge when your peers say that you're a really good back. He's only missed 1 game in the NFL. It wasn't due to injuries. In college, he had a couple of sprains. This guy's been healthy, and the reason why I think he can be healthy and stay healthy is because he's big and physical. He's only 6 foot, 224, so he's got that body that is made to carry the ball 20, 25 times.
He's the kind of guy you don't want running into you.
No, you don't. You don't. He's very powerful. The one negative thing on him is he's not really good in the passing game. Now, if Coach Nagy came out and said that they didn't really blame Jordan Howard for that because in college he was never asked to catch the ball, and they've been working hard at this offseason developing him there. Coach Nagy said And I don't know how much of this is preseason hype because coaches say a lot of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Coach Nagy said that he believes Jordan Howard can be a 3-down back. If he develops into that, this guy is going to be, top 5, top 6 running back.
Yeah.
And so I look at Howard. For me, he's a mid-range running back too. I look at Cohen. We'll talk about him in a second, but that's kind of where, once again, this is Howard's team. Don't worry about Cohen's development. He's not going to take away any carries from him.
Yeah, exactly. Tariq Cohen is a guy who honestly I think is a little bit overrated. And don't mean to be mean, I think he's productive. He's going to be fantastic receiving specialist, a change of pace guy who can do a few things that the Bears need him to do. I don't devalue his football value as a coach. And I've coached in the past. Having a guy who can do some things and just specialize and do a couple things really well is huge. It's really nice to work with. But as far as his ability to be an every down back, as far as his ability to take up a huge role and to be a huge fantasy guy, I don't see it. His production hasn't been there. With only 1.3 yards after contact, he's just not physical enough, especially on a team that they get the box loaded against them a ton. I believe you said it was second most in the NFL. Jordan Howard had 8-man boxes. It was like 43% of the time.
Yeah, Leonard Fournette was the only one ahead of him at 49% of the time.
That's something that Tariq Cohen just can't handle because he's not forcing through contact. And then the other thing is, well, he's a receiving specialist. He does great. But we talk about how much is the system that he's getting these catches and these stats, and how much is him? Well, only 6.7 yards per reception. That tells you he's not doing a lot after the catch, and he's not getting far downfield, which means he's really just kind of a guy to toss the ball off to make the quarterback feel safe and comfortable. He's a safety blanket. So that, for me, are just two big reasons to say, like, guys, he's not going to take that job over. Don't buy the hype. Every year there's a hype on a guy like Tariq Cohen, and it just doesn't work out.
Yeah, I think Cohen's got value in PPR leagues only. Last year he had 53 catches, but his yardage totals weren't great, like you had pointed out. I like him. I think he's going to be used a lot like Darren Sproles. A nice fit for Nagy's offense. A much better football player than he is a fantasy player. Exactly. I think as far as football player goes, he's going to bring a lot to that offense. This guy's small, 5'6", 181. He's quick, he's fast, but he's not meant to be an every down back. His effectiveness in the running game dropped as the year went on. Early in the year, his yards per carry grade just continued to drop as it continued to go down. I think he caught a few people off guard early in the season there. So once again, you look at this team, Jordan Howard, great running back. Cohen has value in PPR leagues only. After that, barring any serious injuries or suspensions, there's nobody on that team that you need to really consider at this point.
Yeah, exactly. Let's move on now. I think that about sums up this division. It's actually not a terrible division as far as looking for running backs. But let's move on now. We can go to the NFC South. All right, guys, so here we are in the NFC South, and this is we're going to start off with the New Orleans Saints, and of course we're going to talk about the guy who came out of nowhere and shocked us all, Alvin Kamara. First off, I think we should take a minute to admit we were surprised about Alvin Kamara last year. No matter how much fancy research you do, it feels like a guy comes out and just explodes out of nowhere, right? And you only have like 1 week to really know, and things like that. Stuff gets crazy. But we're gonna do something different. We don't really work together a lot when we talk about players. We just do our research and do some information. We just wanted to see how this would go. So I'm gonna talk up Alvin Kamara, and then you're gonna kind of temper the expectations because we want to find a balance. So here we are. Last year, Alvin Kamara had a phenomenal season. He had 6.1 yards per carry. That's insane. That is phenomenal. And 81 catches with 10.2 yards per reception. He was great. He was very, very fantastic. He ranked 6th in yards and 2nd in touchdowns. He had 13 touchdowns last year in only 201 touches. He touched the ball 201 times and got in the end zone 13. I mean, he was so unbelievably productive. What I like even more is Mark Ingram's suspension and the fact that Alvin Kamara isn't going to waste a few games in the season getting into that role. He's going to see the ball more. And that's pretty much a fact, basically. In fact, Alvin Kamara was only on the field for 44% of the Saints' regular season offensive snaps, meaning not even half the time was he out there, and yet he was still able to be a dominant fantasy option. But Rob, why shouldn't we think he's going to be the #1 running back this year? Why shouldn't we overhype him?
Okay, so I feel bad saying this because I like the guy, by the way. But, he was electric last year. He was great. Yards per carry 6.1. He had 13 touchdowns, 81 catches. 1,500 total yards over that. And that's really good if you consider the first few games. He was 3rd on the depth chart behind Adrian Peterson and Ingram. Okay, now he's suspended. Ingram's suspended for 4 games, so that's going to up his value, right? And some people are having him in the top 3. Okay, I will say this. The suspension for Ingram does up his value slightly. Don't overreact, though. I want to say this. the Saints are not going to they're not going to risk wearing down Kamara too much. They have playoff aspirations. Okay, they do. This team is a very good team, and they're built to go far. They want to go farther. I mean, they're one catch away from making it to the championship game last year, obviously against the Vikes. So, but I'm glad that Diggs made that catch. By the way,
Right, that was beautiful.
So, anyways, let's get back to this. So, once Ingram comes back, I guarantee they're not going to let Alvin Kamara wear himself down. Okay, they're not going to let him get 20, 25 carries a game. I don't think he's a big physical back that can handle that. Okay, plus Ingram's only going to miss 30% of the fantasy season, not including playoffs. So I think they want to keep him rested, healthy, and use a lot in the passing game. So I think you're going to see a nice, healthy split once Ingram comes back there. So when I look at him, I think he's an RB1 undoubtedly. But here's some other concerns I have for him, right? They had a historical year last year. Okay, you look at Ingram and Kamara. They combined together to have 25 touchdowns, 139 catches, 3,094 yards, okay? That's not likely to continue. That's a lot of production to expect them to duplicate. Some of those touchdowns are going to go from threes to wide receivers. Defenses are going to study the offseason. They're going to have more game film to look at that. And here's the other mistake I think a lot of people make. They look at a guy that's productive in limited time or less time and say, okay, you just increase his touches, his carries, and his numbers will go through the roof. A prime example of that is Lamar Miller. Playing for Miami years ago, 5.1 yards per carry. This guy was great. Everybody said, why aren't they giving him the ball more? If they increase his carries, his touches, this guy's going to be an all-pro. He might be the #1 running back. But the coaches felt like, if we give him too many carries, this guy will wear down. He just can't be that productive. We want to limit his carries. Sure enough, he comes to Houston. As you've seen an increase in his carries, you know what's happened?
Decrease in production.
Decreased production. So I'm not saying Kamara's not a good, once again, I think he's a running back 1. I think he'll have slightly better stats than that last year, but not significantly better. That's where I feel like he lands at that. So.
Yeah, exactly. And now we come to Mark Ingram. And Mark Ingram is a confusing situation. Why was he productive last year? Last year he was the running back that we kind of have been waiting for him to be for a long time now. A lot of people just see him as a bruiser, but he was still pretty effective in the passing game. He had 58 catches last year. Can you even believe that he had that many catches with Alvin Kamara, who had 81? Like, they combined for an insane amount of catches. That was hands down the best backfield in the NFL. But I think Mark Ingram's really just an RB4. I think one reason that we can look at that and understand, first of all, you talk about the suspension. What was it for? Well, it was performance-enhancing drugs. And we'd like to see what is he going to do now that he's not on those. Imagine he's going to be slightly less productive. But even more for me, it's looking at the playoffs. In the playoffs, they gave Alvin Kamara a much larger role. When they played the Vikings, he had a much bigger role, and he was very productive. In fact, dare I say, he thrived in that bigger role. Again, not that he's going to have a huge increase, but if the Saints are in a close game, if the Saints are trying to struggle in production, right, like who's their main guy? It's Kamara, and that's it for me. I think Mark Ingram loses a lot of value this year.
So, yeah, I look at Mark Ingram. So where do I land with him? After disappointing the first 3 years, he's really developing a very good running back. His yards per carry, excellent. The last 2 years, his yards per carry are 4.98. His overall yardage totals have been very good. He's great in the passing game. He's averaged 51 catches per season the last 3 years. He's had double-digit touchdowns the last 2 years. What I wonder, though, is early in his career he struggled, and then in the last couple years he's been amazing. How much are those numbers aided by performance-enhancing drugs? We've seen a lot of times guys will come back from that and never be the same. And so I wonder, once again, who the real Mark Ingram is going to be in terms of that. With that said, he's far too talented to ignore. But I think that he's going far too early in drafts. People are really excited. I thought this suspension would hurt his value more than it has, but it really hasn't. For me, he's an RB3. You said RB4, RB3. I could see you're somewhere in there, because for me, he's a late RB3, not early. So yeah. I'm kind of close to where you're at. The suspension hurts him. I think you can't discount him. But I think you definitely need to temper your expectations. So that's where I'm at with him. He's one of those guys. You're probably not going to get Ingram and Kamara, but it'd be a nice handcuff to get.
Yeah.
And not start both of them, but start one and keep Ingram on your bench if you could afford that. But most teams, let's be honest, you're not going to be able to draft those guys and have a third running back as your starter too. That's just not going to happen.
Well, I'm going to tell you this. I don't even know if I'd try that if I were you. And I'll tell you why. You have to have a dominant team all around. Yes. You need a manageable quarterback. You need a good tight end. You need good wideouts, good running backs, good kicker, good defense. Don't underestimate any position. And if you're just going to take an early pick on Mark Ingram just because you want to be safe or just because you want to have both guys on the same team.
You want to hedge your bet.
Or you want to hedge. No, you guys are going to have to take a little bit of a risk here, and you're going to have to just say, like, Alvin Kamara is the guy, right? And that I know that you want to play it safe and have the backup and have handcuffs, but I've seen people waste spots on their bench for a handcuff.
Yep.
I've seen people, like last year, picked up Le'Veon Bell's backup and kept him all year and said, well, just in case he'll be in free agency, pick him up then, you know? So don't waste any spots on your bench just because of that. But you're right that he does have a lot of value there. Are you ready to move on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. So as I said, and I want to put this one out there, we talk about I talked about how I put sentences down to keep myself focused. And for me, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the sentence I wrote is that backfield is a bad relationship. It may have a few good moments and be very tempting and exciting, but honestly, is it worth it? And I think it is. It might be worth it. It's certainly a gamble. It depends. So we'll talk about it. What do you have to say, or what do you think about? Everyone thinks Ronald Jones Jr. is going to be the guy.
So we're talking about Tampa Bay right now, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I look at it, of all the running backs there for Tampa Bay, it's a confusing running back situation. I think a lot of people feel like this is Jones's team. In some ways, they're right. He's definitely the most talented player there, but I do have concerns with Jones. One, he's smaller. And smaller backs like him have a hard time overcoming those size issues. Sometimes it happens, like a Jamal Charles did it, but those are rare cases. He's an explosive back. He's got great breakaway speed, but size is a concern. And right now, I think the team would love to see Peyton Barber win that spot, carry the ball first, second down, and then be able to use Jones, maybe come out of the backfield, third downs, passing situations, things like that. So I think Jones is going to be given every opportunity to win it out. I just don't know if this is a guy that can handle that wear and tear in the NFL. I think that they would like to see a nice mix there, so that's kind of where he's at. But you can't ignore him. So I look at him right now. I think of a guy that they're going to give Barber an opportunity to be the lead back there, and I think he's a guy that you need to own. But for me, he's more of a running back, probably 4 at this point, who's a better fit in PPR leagues.
Mm-hmm. So for me, here's what I talk about. I want to talk about, I guess, all the running backs as a whole real quick. But for me, I have a very hard time looking at this. First of all, simply that team. We made a post the other day like, oh man, the Browns are really bad. Look at things that are happening. You should check out our Instagram to see that post.
Yeah.
Who do you think is the second worst run team in the NFL? And it occurred to me, it might be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They are a mess right now. That running game isn't fantastic. Everyone knows they have a bad offensive line, and their quarterback situation is not preferred. Maybe that running game will be better, but Peyton Barber could certainly fill that role. They have Charles Sims there. For me, Ronald Jones Jr. feels like a driver. If you've ever watched NASCAR and you see a guy, they're coming towards the last few laps, he needs to make his move, right? He's got to go to get that job. He's got to go to move into that number one role. But it's very difficult if you have cars on both sides of you, right? And that's what I feel like is the case with Ronald Jones Jr. Peyton Barber's a little bit bigger back, and he hasn't been extremely efficient, but he had 3 top 20 fantasy finishes, or top 20 fantasy weeks, when he was playing in place of Doug Martin late in last year. He's a little bit bigger of a back. He's a bit of a bruiser. And then we look at Charles Sims as a guy they love to use just as kind of like a Tariq Cohen. He's just a specialist guy, receiving back. And I wonder, how much can those guys chip away from Ronald Jones Jr.? You get one guy coming in on third downs and another guy coming in on goal line. Well, what's left for Ronald Jones Jr. to really do? Honestly, I feel like he'd have to be extremely impressive to etch out a role large enough worth often where you have to take him. But he is absolutely worth a shot, and he is a very athletic and talented running back. I don't want to come down on him too hard. I just also want to be realistic.
Yeah, I like Jones. I think Jones has got some talent there. I think he's got a high ceiling, but he's got a lower floor because there are question marks. I look at Peyton Barber. You're right. He's a more physical back, definitely much bigger, and he's going to be given every chance to win the first and second to win that position and be the guy carrying the ball in the first and second downs there. Career yards per carry 4 is not impressive. He does lack skill in the passing game. I don't think that Barber's going to do a lot of damage in the fantasy world, but it definitely looks like I hate to say this, a lot of this is another situation that probably not a bad idea to handcuff the two. I look at Charles Sims, like you said. 3 years ago, he had 51 catches. 2 years ago, he was on pace for 60. He might have some PPR value, although Jones' strength is in the passing game, so I devalue Sims a bit. And then, of course, there's Jaquez Rodgers there. And for me, Jaquez Rodgers is a guy that is purely a backup. He's got no value unless there's injury or extreme ineffectiveness. And so, to me, he's way down that list as far as guys you need to consider. I would love for Jones to become the next Jamal Charles. It can happen. Every once in a while, backs that are smaller can do that. But let's be honest, they are a rarity in the NFL.
Mm-hmm, they are. And that's like why I said, bad relationship will have a few good moments, but won't be worth it. At any week, Peyton Barber could get 2 touchdowns because he could just get 2 good goal line carries. Charles Sims at any week could have a big receiving touchdown because of what he's able to do in the passing game. Ronald Jones Jr. is athletic. He can catch out of the backfield. He can do a lot of things. Any week he could have 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. But with how many guys are there in that offense and that system, none of them will be able to do it consistently. And I just don't want anyone on my team that from week to week, I don't know if they're going to be able to even get carries compared to other guys.
Yeah, these are guys that I would have on my bench because you can never have enough running backs on your bench. Can't say it enough. Build your bench with running backs.
Absolutely.
With that said, I think the key to winning fantasy is having solid starting running backs. For that reason, I would not trust any of those guys to be my starting backs coming the beginning of the season. There are guys I wouldn't mind having on my bench as my running back 3 or 4, but definitely would not trust them at this point to be my starters.
Exactly. All right, now let's move on. We can talk about the Carolina Panthers. They're a very interesting situation. The 2 backs there that have fantasy value are Christian McCaffrey and C.J. Anderson, and they're unbelievably distinct running backs in how they specialize, and they do 2 different things. C.J. Anderson is the physical ground runner, and Christian McCaffrey, who I believe is primarily the starter, who's the main guy in that offense, he's the receiving back and has a lot more PPR value. That's very obvious, but why don't you talk a little bit more about those guys?
Okay, so yeah, I'll break that down. Look at C.J. Anderson. So I look at C.J. Anderson brought in. I think his role will be very similar to Stewart's last year, but I think he'll do it more effectively. Stewart struggled last year. I think his yards per carry 3.4, bad. When I look at C.J. Anderson, I expect a year of about 800 to 900 rushing yards, maybe 250 passing yards, and 6 or 7 TDs. I think that's very realistic. That's not a great year, but that's actually very solid numbers. He's very underrated. Last year he had 1,000 yards quietly. A lot of people don't realize that he did that. I think he could be a nice late round value. I think he needs to be owned. Initially for me, Anderson rates as a running back 4. And I'll say this, there's been some talk from the coaches and from the head coach that Christian McCaffrey will see an increased role, right? There's also been talk coming out of camp from a lot of the coaches there that Christian McCaffrey's role is going to be exact same this year as it was last year. So if that's the case, somebody has to fill into that and get those carries, run between the tackles. I think that's going to be C.J. Anderson. I like him there. I get to Christian McCaffrey, but do you want to add anything, or how do you want to work this?
Yeah, no, C.J. Anderson is just another guy who he's a guy who has enough value to tempt me, enough value to be a good bench running back, but he will not be a starter. He just won't. And I want to make that very clear. Last year he posted his first and only 1,000-yard rushing season. I'd be surprised if he did that again. I don't think it'll happen. He doesn't keep himself very involved in the passing game. He only had 4 touchdowns last year as a result of being on average 59 yards away from the goal line on his 245 rushes. That's like 5th worst in the NFL. That just simply means that offense last year in Denver wasn't able to move the ball a lot. And that's actually a problem that Carolina has as well. So I imagine he's going to have a very similar season as to last year, but just a bit worse because of McCaffrey taking plenty of time up when he wants to get out there and he's going to be involved in the passing game.
Well, you look at Carolina. I think Carolina's offense is going to move the ball better than Denver did last year. The problem with it is you get within that red zone, you get in the 20-yard line around there. Every year, you can expect 5 to 10 touchdowns are going to be lost to Cam Newton. Okay? Every year. So right there, those are just 5 to 10 rushing touchdowns. Boom, they're just off the board. That hurts your running back production.
And then you got your tight end Greg Olsen, who's kind of a goal line specialist now because he's a little bit older, a little bit slower. And then you get Christian McCaffrey, who's another guy they could run it in with, or they can catch it. And so, yeah, that's another thing. And so let's talk about McCaffrey. Last year, he ranked first among running backs with 110 targets, 3rd in reception with 80 catches, 5th in yards, and 2nd in touchdowns. So he had 5 touchdowns. So he was actually fairly productive last year. Why don't you talk about it? I know you feel that he was far more confident far more productive the second half of the year.
Yeah, he was. He did struggle in the first half. The first 8 games almost split right down the middle. First 8 games, his yards per carry was 2.39. The next 8 it rose to 4.68. That was solid. He is a matchup nightmare, really, honestly. I think that Christian McCaffrey, look, he ranked 2nd among running backs with 448 snaps in the passing routes last year. They broke down the different routes that he took. He had 8 as a wide out. He had 19 in the slot. He had 10% left, 9% right, 72% out of the backfield. They broke it all down. The bottom line is he just creates a lot of mismatches out there in the passing game for linebackers, corners, safeties, things like that. He finished in the top 10 in fantasy scoring among running backs and PPR leagues. I think he's going to improve as a runner, but he's really his strength is in the passing game. As a rookie, he had 80 catches for 651 yards. I think he could struggle running the ball, and the reason why is he's a smaller back. With that said, though, last year he only came in about 205 pounds. He's 5'11", but they said reports are that he put on 20 pounds of muscle in the offseason. Now, if he did that, and if it doesn't slow him down, that might help him increase the value in his running game there. I look at Christian McCaffrey. I see him as an RB1 in PPR leagues. In standard leagues, for me, he falls down to about a running back 3-4.
Exactly. That's what I was just going to ask you. Where is he in PPR leagues? Where is he in standard? I completely agree with you. I have nothing more to add to that, to be honest. I think that about sums it up.
Yeah, when we say things like running back 3-4, why is it that we don't commit to one? Why do we leave between? Well, when I say running back 3-4, that depends upon your league size. If you're in a 10-team or 16-team league, it depends upon your scoring. That you have to contextualize into your league. I don't know the size of your league, so that's why we kind of give that flexibility in our numbers.
Exactly. All right, let's round out this division with the Atlanta Falcons. We can talk about Tevin Coleman and Devonta Freeman. Devonta Freeman is a guy who I think has been a little bit undervalued going into this year. In 2015, he was the highest scoring fantasy running back with over 1,600 yards from scrimmage and 14 touchdowns. Excuse me, do you want to talk?
Yeah, so I agree with you. Freeman, a couple years ago, this guy was a stud. Last 3 years, in 45 games, he scored 35 touchdowns. This guy finds the end zone. Even though he's not a big back, he's only 205. This guy doesn't have a problem finding the end zone. He's averaged 54 catches the last 3 years. Those are very good numbers. They really bump up his PPR value. Although he has had a decline in the last 2 years in terms of catches. Part of that could be the departure of Shanahan as offensive coordinator. Also, Freeman helps. Freeman's very capable in the passing game, so that devalues him a little bit there. Any concerns I have for Freeman? The guy's a stud. You can't ignore that. We've talked about him in other videos. If I have a concern for Freeman, it's the fact that he's not big at 206. Other backs like him that size have durability issues. Also, he's had 2 recent concussions, which is always a concern with the whole issue of CTE in the NFL. 2 concussions makes me a little bit leery there. But once again, when he's on the field, he's very productive. You can't ignore that. Another thing that I have a concern for with him has nothing to do with him, but it's his backup, Tevin Coleman. Tevin Coleman's very good, meaning the team doesn't have to push Freeman back into action if he's banged up. And they did that last year. They can limit his carries a little bit because they have an adequate backup in Coleman. But before I get back to Coleman, anything you want to add to Freeman there?
Yeah, so I just did some research on Coleman and found he is one of just 4 guys to place top 10 in carries and targets over each of the last 3 years.
You talking about Freeman?
Freeman is.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry. And then Freeman has also been top 10 in red zone carries, attempts inside the 10-yard line, and rushes inside the 5-yard line each of the last 3 years. He also ranked 3rd or better in red zone targets in 2015 and 2016, but dropped to 13th in red zone looks last season. Because he missed 2 games, he would have been a lot higher had he played those last 2 games. For me, there's no arguing his talent. The 2 concerns are, like you said, his concussions. He's 1 concussion away from not playing this year. He really is. 1 concussion, and that's it, I think. And then the production of Tevin Coleman. For the Atlanta Falcons, you have no problem taking Freeman out and putting Coleman in. Despite missing 4 games over the last 2 seasons and being the 2nd running back on that roster, Tevin Coleman has still finished no worse than 22nd among fantasy running backs for fantasy points over the last 2 years. So he's a top 25 running back despite missing time and being a backup. There is no better backup running back in the NFL. If you like handcuffs, if that's your thing, if that's what you want to do and you want to feel safe about the backup, go get Freeman and go get Coleman, because that's the best backup in the NFL right there is Tevin Coleman.
Yeah, 19 touchdowns in 2 years. 19 TDs in 2 years by a backup is amazing. This guy is versatile in the run and the pass. So when I look at him, here's how I rate Coleman right now. For me, he's a RB4 in standards. He's a borderline RB3 in PPRs. Now, if Freeman goes down and gets hurt, okay, like he did last season, Coleman immediately becomes a starter running back 2. He's got that much value. Last year that happened where Freeman was out and Coleman started against Tampa Bay, and Coleman goes out, gets 97 yards and 2 TDs. So he's a guy that's a must draft. I would draft Coleman, but I would not depend on him being one of your 2 starters. He could be a flex play if you're in a league that has flex position he starts, but I definitely wouldn't trust him as the 1 or 2 guy. But he's way too talented to ignore.
All right, well, let's move on now. Unless you have anything to say to round out this division, I think that really sums it up nice.
Yeah, if there's anything that changes here, we'll let you guys know in upcoming videos on our site. But right now, with the information that we have today, where we're sitting here, the first week in August, something like that, August 10th, around that date.
August 9th.
Whatever it is.
I know
yeah.
because Madden comes out tomorrow on the 10th.
That's it, of course, video games. So anyways, where we sit right now, that's what we have.
All right, so now we'll move on here. We can go to the NFC East. All right, so now here we are. We come to the NFC East, and I think we should start off with the Eagles, and let's talk about it. I think we're on the same page here. Jay Ajayi, what a solid back. We've liked him all offseason, and this could be a great year for him. He was so productive last year on 4.51 yards per carry and 2.37 yards after contact. He got the job done. That was actually best among the 76 running backs with 500 plus carries during that span since he's been playing for a while now. What do you have to say about him? I think that he could be, you know who he reminds me of this year, his fantasy value is? He's not a fantastic running back catching out of the backfield. He reminds me of 2016 LeGarrette Blount, who is on a good offense and just so darn physical that he could just force his way into the end zone and get a lot of touchdowns.
Yeah, I like the LeGarrette Blount analogy, although I would say he's got better hands than Blount.
He does. He certainly does.
He's not quite as big. He's a little more agile. But I like Jay Ajayi, and we'll talk about him briefly here. I don't want to get too much into it because we've talked about him before, but I love him. Right now on our site, we have him ranked 13th, and we see him as a very good running back, too. He thrived in Philadelphia last year in a limited time. But even before he got traded, he did pretty well last year in Miami a little bit. His yards per carry down, but he had 2 games where he had 100 yards, playing on a brutal Miami offense with a not a great offensive line and with Jay Cutler there, who wasn't great at quarterback. So after the trade, his yards per carry jumps 3.4 to 5.8. Now he gets to play on a great offense with an excellent offensive line for an entire season. The first time in his career he's had an offensive line like that. So if you look at the Eagles' offensive line, right, and where they stand in terms of rankings, if you go to different sites, based on the criteria, the opinions of men, what stats they use, how they evaluate it, every site will be a little bit different in terms of how they rank offensive line. But the one consistent thing, right, every site has the Eagles ranked in the top 5, and in 40% of the sites, they have them ranked number 1. Okay, offensive line out there. They're very good offensive line. They're an excellent unit. By far the best that he's had to run behind. This guy in 2016 exploded. We talked about many times. 3 games over 200 rushing yards. Only 3 other players have done that before that: Tiki Barber, Earl Campbell, and O.J. Simpson. All those guys went on to have great careers, okay? The Eagles' offensive line is much better than the Dolphins had in 2016 when he ended that year with 1,272 yards in 15 games and a yards per carry of 4.9. Now, last year, his overall numbers took a hit because, one, they didn't need him to carry the ball that much. But you look at the last 5 weeks or so, he averaged 15 carries per game 5 of the last 6 games. So you take that there, you extrapolate that, assuming he gets 15 carries per game, that's very conservative. And you look at a 5.0 yards per carry, which is decent. Last year, he averaged 5.9 with Philadelphia. In Miami, during an average behind average offensive line in 2016, he averaged 4.9. So let's just take 5 there. Over 15 carries per game, that's easily, turns out to be 1,200 yards a year, and that's very easy, conservative estimations. His 2.4 yards after contact since entering the league is best among all running backs with 500 plus carries during that time. He's better than backs like Gurley and Bell, you name it. This guy, his yards after contact are amazing. Here's another thing I want to put out there. This is kind of a more subjective argument than is a concrete argument, but I want to say this. Look at the Eagles coaches, team, and organization. They know how to evaluate talent. You know, they took that debacle left by Jim Kelly, right? They turned it around. They won a Super Bowl. They have evaluated and hit on a number of talents out there in the draft and in free agency, okay? So then I have to ask you this question. Why was a team that was doing just fine last year, that was doing great on offense, moving the ball well, why did they aggressively pursue him and trade for him?
On a year where they were winning the Super Bowl. And they knew it at the time. It's not like this was a total shock to us. Their quarterback, Carson Wentz, was playing fantastic. That defense was fantastic. Did they need that? Probably not, no.
But I tell you what, I think, just like other guys, they evaluate talent very well, and they found a stud back. I like this guy. Assistant coach and running backs coach Deuce Staley suggests that he's going to be the workhorse this season. Doug Peterson, the head coach, said this guy's been in great shape. We're impressed with how he's been in the OTAs. They love this guy. I love Jay. So he is, barring an injury or a suspension, he is the go-to guy. So I want to move on from him, unless you have something to add to that.
No, he's the guy. Let's move on and talk Corey Clement. Yes. I think he's underrated. What do you think?
I actually love Corey Clement a lot. But if you look at last year, we had a deep sleeper video. We had a number of guys we nailed. He was one of the guys before the season started. We called him a deep sleeper. And he played really well last year. He was capable in the passing game. He was even better in the playoffs when it matters. In 3 games in the playoffs, he had 10 catches, 131 yards, and a TD. He had 7 touchdowns last year. He ran well, too. He did a lot of productive things on the field there. The unfortunate thing with him is that Jay Ajayi is going to get a bulk of the carries and targets that are left over. And essentially what's going to happen is after Jay Ajayi, there's really a 3-way split between Clement, Sproles, and Smallwood. And so I look at Corey Clement. I like this guy. I see him as a running back 4 or 5. He is talented, therefore he needs to be on your bench. But unless Jay goes down, he's nothing more than an occasional matchup play. That's kind of where I value him. But it's not because the guy doesn't have talent. I think he's got a lot of talent. He just needs the opportunity that he may not get enough carries to make a significant fantasy impact.
Yeah, exactly. He's a guy who has added value in PPR leagues because they're looking for a guy to come in and fill that role, and I think that's going to be him. He averaged 15.8 snaps per game last year, which was fairly impressive for a guy who went undrafted. It took him quite a while to earn his role in that offense. Including the playoffs, he averaged 4.43 yards per carry and 2.01 yards after contact. He had 80 attempts and caught 20 of 24 targets for 262 yards and a really good 10.9 yards per target, which was very productive right there. But the thing that surprises me most, guys, the thing that tells me, okay, this guy really can get the job done. How many touchdowns do you think he scored last year? He scored 7 touchdowns. He scored 7. Now, one of them was a kick return. You can't count it, right? Because it doesn't have fantasy value in most leagues, in standard leagues. But that means he scored 6 touchdowns last year, rushing and receiving. Darren Sproles said he's going to retire after this year. I think his role is being kind of whittled down smaller and smaller every year as he gets a bit slower and less productive. I'm not surprised. I'm not wowed or too excited about Wendell Smallwood. I really, really like Corey Clement. The more I look at him, the more I talk about him, the more I think Corey Clement could be a fantastic option this year. Not as a starting running back, but as a great handcuff, as a great running back, especially in PPR leagues.
Yeah, a guy that's on your bench as a sleeper. You look at Darren Sproles. Coach have talked about they're going to use him more than most people expect this year. Don't buy into the hype. Even if that's the case, this guy is 35 years old. He doesn't have great size. The type of player that he is going to limit his role. He's going to be using punt returns, passing downs, an occasional run. He's going to be a jack of all trades, a master of none, and that rarely equates to high fantasy value. If Darren Sproles has any value, it'd be in the passing game in PPR leagues. The problem with that, though, is that Clement, Smallwood, and Ajayi all can catch the ball. I see no fantasy value with Darren Sproles there at all. Barring an injury, he only becomes valuable in matchup plays in full-point PPR leagues, and even that's a stretch for Darren Sproles. So for me, it's Jay Ajayi. I like Corey Clement, and a guy you need to have on your bench, but I would definitely not trust him to be a starter for you.
Exactly. Let's move on now. I want to talk about the Giants. One thing that's very clear about the Giants' backfield is that's Saquon Barkley's offense as far as the running backs go. As I said earlier, I put a sentence together to remind me what I'm trying to say and get across. And you know what Saquon Barkley makes me think of? Saquon Barkley makes me think of bacon. And that's really weird, but it'll make sense. You ever meet that person that like they get too excited about something and they ruin it for you? I met somebody one time, they just loved bacon so much. And they were weird about it, like they had like a bacon scented candle and like bacon axe spray, and like it got to the point where it's like, I don't want to enjoy bacon because you enjoy it too much for the rest of us. That's Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley is very good running back, he is, but people are overhyping him. Right now, his ADP has him being taken as the 5th overall fantasy player. And it makes me want to hate on Saquon Barkley and talk about how bad he's going to be because 5th overall is just too high. He is a first-round draft pick in my book, although I am very nervous about taking a rookie in the first round. But I think he's a RB1. I think he's a fantastic option. But I'm seeing him go before guys like Kareem Hunt. I mean, that's just too much, guys. I just want to make sure that we're not overhyping him, I guess. So that's, I guess, before I continue to talk, though, what do you have to say about Barkley?
Okay, so I look at Barkley. The guy's a stud. He has no deficiencies in his game. He's a true 3-down back. He could have landed at a better situation. The Giants have much improved offensive line through free agency and the draft. They also have great weapons around him with Odell Beckham, Shepard, Ingram, so he's not going to see a lot of 8-man boxes. I can't remember a running back that's left college and coming to the NFL that seems as well prepared to be successful as he has been, right? Seems like every practice, the coach has told him more and more. Talk about how he continues to shock the team, what he's able to do, his skill set. He's not restricted in the game book. He's a true 3-down back. There's nothing in his game. There's no facet of his game where he's lacking. He's strong everywhere. Barring an injury or suspension, this guy really is the only back that I'm going to look at on this team. But I will agree with you there. We did in one of our videos, we talked about, the old saying, one in the hand is better than 2 in the bush. And basically, this guy's got a lot of potential. Everything's pointing to him being a stud. But how many other guys have been like that? I think about Kajana Carter, on and on and on. We could talk about running backs in the past that were drafted and labeled can't miss, who missed. And so with that said, I like this guy. But let's not forget, he still hasn't played a snap in the NFL. And so we just still need to see him go out there. Value this guy. He's a running back one, undoubtedly. But don't put him ahead of some of these guys that have proven themselves in the NFL, that have broken their teeth and proven that they can be productive. I like Barkley, but I think you're right. Right now, his draft value and his hype is crazy insane. In fact, I think in the NFL, he's got the #1 jersey sales in the entire NFL.
which I get it for jerseys.
Yeah.
I understand that. But you're going to put your fantasy team, especially if a lot of people put money down on their leagues, you're playing for money and you're going to take a chance on this guy that high. That just feels a little bit too much to me. I don't want to hate on him too much. He had put some fantastic. You guys have to watch our running back rankings video, our first one, to hear some of his crazy combine numbers. He sure is athletic, but that's his offense. That for me is about as simple as it gets. We talk about the backup, Jonathan Stewart. He was really not productive last year. He's very old. He hasn't played a full 16 games since 2011. I just don't think he's a great option. He's nothing more than a handcuff to Barkley.
Yeah, you know what? Stewart is definitely, I think he was brought in really to mentor the young running back. Obviously, this is a guy that's had decreased production last 3-4 years in Carolina. He's not young anymore. Stewart has no value there. The guy that's got some value is Wayne Gallman. He has moments last year. He's decent, actually. He was above average in the passing game. He's a solid backup. If you look at the last 4 games down the stretch there, his yards per carry were good. He was actively involved in the passing game. Wayne Gallman actually does have some value. But once again, that value is dependent on Barkley being ineffective or getting hurt or being suspended. I don't see him getting suspended, and I don't see him being ineffective. So unless he gets hurt, Wayne Gallman is not a guy that I would draft, but he's definitely a guy I would keep my eye on in case you need to pick up in free agency.
Exactly. So that right there is the situation. I completely agree. Gallman's the backup, and I'm glad you said that. Let's talk about the Cowboys running game now. Hey, big shocker, guys. Ezekiel Elliott's the sole starting running back in that offense. Just to clarify that, Elliott scored as the number 2 fantasy running back during his rookie year, in which he only played 15 games. Last year, during the 10 games he did play, he was also second. He's just been phenomenal. His rookie year, he averaged 5.1 yards per carry. He's been great. I don't really have a whole lot of concerns with him. He's not fantastic in the passing game. He's not a huge receiving running back, but he's a great option. He's elite. He's a top 5 RB. He's a top 4 fantasy guy. I mean,
yeah, you know, early in the videos, we talked about concern. He had a fall off in production last year, so we thought we need to explain why that happened. But I don't think anybody out there cares because he's being hyped huge out there. His average draft position is very high. I don't think anybody's scared off by this guy. In his fall off in production, I think can easily be contributed to the pending suspension, the moment by moment, not knowing, am I going to play, am I not going to play? It makes it hard to get ready physically and mentally. That's obviously not an issue this year. I think he's going to be ready. He benefits from one of the best offensive line in football, and really the strength of the Dallas offensive line is running the ball and run blocking. That's where they're strong at. So you look at like Philadelphia's got a great offensive line overall, but Cowboys probably have the best offensive line in terms of running the ball. Last 6 games before being suspended last year, he was averaging 118 rushing yards per game. Averaged out over 16 games, that's 1,888 yards. He's going to be just fine there. This guy finds the end zone. He's averaged 1 touchdown per game since he's been in the NFL. He's a big physical body. He's going to get carries there.
Well, you talk about it. No running back has scored more rushing touchdowns than Ezekiel Elliott the last 2 seasons. He's just a physical runner who he just forces it in.
Yeah. No, a lot of people think his value is hurt in PPR leagues, but in reality, it's not. Ezekiel Elliott was second in fantasy points in PPR leagues in 2016. Last year, okay, in 2017, he had 210 points in just 10 games. Projected out over 16 games at that same pace, he would have had 349 points. That would have left him 3rd in total points in PPR leagues, ahead of PPR studs like Alvin Kamara. So he's not hurt there. Honestly, barring an injury or suspension, which is possible because he's had some issues, although right now Ezekiel Elliott's been quiet. He's been keeping his nose clean as far as we can hear, as far as we know. Looks good. Barring that, there's really no other running backs on this team to look at. If you're going to look at another running back there, if there's one because of injuries or something, it's going to be Rod Smith.
I'm glad you said that, and you stole it from me, so you can shut up and quit talking now. But that's the thing, guys. Alfred Morris is out of the mix now. He's gone. Rod Smith is the backup right now, and I really like him. In fact, when Ezekiel Elliott was gone, Rod Smith came in, and only 16 running backs scored more fantasy points than Rod Smith during that stint. It tells you how good that offensive line is and how good he can be. Again, I'm not a huge handcuff guy, but if something happens to Elliott, Rod Smith is the guy who could actually be a fairly solid fantasy option. Yeah, I don't know how much to say about that. It seems pretty simple to me.
Yeah, he's a guy that's going to fill in relief. He's going to be used on 3rd down passing situation. Really, his value is heightened in PPR leagues. He showed versatility in the passing game, and look at the last 3 games last year. He had 11 catches, 157 yards, and a TD. He's not a guy that I'm probably going to draft unless you're in a really big league. When I say big league, you got to be more than 12 teams, or you got to have deep benches. So that's a guy to definitely keep an eye on. Probably not somebody you need to handcuff or draft, but just somebody to be aware. And I guess you could throw him on your bench if he's like your maybe 5th or 6th running back, or something like that.
Exactly. Let's move on now to the final team in this division, the Washington Redskins. Rob, do you want to explain what just happened?
Well, I want to hype a guy, and then I want to
just tear him down.
then I want to break hearts of a lot of you out there.
Okay, so here we are now again. Like I said, we're talking about Washington, and I guess I'll just hand it over to you so you can do that.
So let's talk about the running back situation. Yeah, you want me to go?
Yeah, you go. Sorry, I'm kind of. You know what?
Let's just go. Let me get to it. Okay, so the guy right now that everybody loves, looks like he's going to be the guy there, is Darius Geis. Okay, Rob Kelly is not great. Samaje Perine underwhelmed his rookie year. He had 2 games that were good. Otherwise, he finished with a yards per carry 3.4. That really opened the door for him when he was drafted to have a great year and put up big numbers, which he did in college. His running style has been compared to Arian Foster. A lot of people felt he would have been drafted in the first round, but he had some off-the-field issues that kind of hurt his value. Many experts felt that he was the second best back in the draft besides the guy you talked about, Saquon Barkley. Okay. He has great size, 5'11", 224. He's got great speed adjustment. He's been compared by Player Profiler to an Ezekiel Elliott. These are big names that are comparing him to Ezekiel Elliott. You look at Arian Foster. He was productive at LSU. And then the Redskins coach, Jay Gruden, said, "It's been exciting watching second-round running back Geis catch the football." Gruden said Geis is more of a first or second down baner. Basically, when he was drafted, he said he's a guy that's not going to be used in the passing situation, but has great value in first and second down. But now, after watching him in practice, the coach said this guy can actually be used in passing situations. He's what I would call a running back 3, borderline running back 2, and he's rising until tonight. Because as we were taping this video,
we paused the video. It's a very long video with a lot of research, and we paused the video, take a break. It's very hot up here, and I check my phone and get a text. And Rob, what is it about?
And it said that he left his first preseason game with a knee injury, possible ACL tear. Now, we don't know that yet, so if it turns out to be something minor like a sprain, I love this guy, but he may be out for the year, so you're going to have to watch our follow-up videos or look on our website to see where he's at. So for all you guys who love this guy, and I loved him too, boy, your dreams came crashing down possibly this evening during the preseason. We'll have to follow up tomorrow and see how that goes.
Exactly. We're going to, and guys, this is why I talk about follow us on Facebook. Follow us on Instagram. We post, we update these things. There's a reason for having that. It's not just because I don't want to stop and waste tons of time to make a video about this, but I can quickly make a post about Darius Geis in 5 minutes and update everyone. So that's what that's about. What do you think about Chris Thompson? He's the only other guy, I guess, that I really feel like I want to talk about.
Okay, well, I'm going to talk about Robert Kelly and Samaje Perine. Not now, but I'll talk about Chris Thompson first, but I will go back and talk to them because we may have to now, right?
We're going to have to at this point. I didn't do a lot of research for them because in my book it was Geis, but then here we are, and I guess the football changes fast. In fact, it was funny. I saw a video from last year. It was 11 months ago. It wasn't even a full year ago, and it was who will be the future quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings, and it wasn't
our video, by the way.
It wasn't Kirk Cousins. It wasn't our video. It was somebody else. And it wasn't Case Keenum. It was Teddy Bridgewater or Sam Bradford.
Boom. Gone.
Boom. Gone. And just that's how fast things change. So
let's look at Chris Thompson then, right? You brought him up? Okay,
yeah.
So he's a great PPR play. There's reports that he's recovering slowly from his leg break last year, but they're increasing his activity in camp. He's looking better and better. And recent news would seem to report the fact that he should be ready for week 1. Now, last year he was on pace for 470 rushing yards and 816 receiving yards, and 62 catches with 10 touchdowns before his injury. The coach loves him. They love his role in the passing game. He's a guy that is huge there. You look at Alex Smith. He loves to throw high percentage passes. If you look at Thompson's per game point average before being injured, he was on pace to finish top 10 in PPR scoring. This is a guy that's got huge value. I look at Chris Thompson. I see him as a running back 2-3 in PPR leagues if healthy. Watch his progress in the preseason. What do you think about Chris Thompson?
Exactly. He put up 510 receiving yards and caught 4 touchdowns, both ranked top 6 at the running back position. He's a PPR stud who is a solid RB2. In fact, last year he was on pace to be an RB1 in PPR leagues. It tells you just how dramatic the scoring is. In standard, I don't know how excited I am about him. Definitely much, much less value, but I really wanted to bring that up. Do not forget about this guy in PPR leagues.
Yeah.
There it is. So now you want to talk about
Robert Kelly. A couple years ago, Coach talked about how he loved this guy. He's big, physical. He's a one-cut back. Always gets you positive yard. Doesn't lose a lot of yardage there. Currently, he was listed on the number 1 on the depth chart. So one of the things that we were going to say in the video was, don't worry about that right now. A lot of coaches will do that on depth charts where they leave rookies down at the bottom because basically it's sending the message to them that, hey, you need to earn your way up there. And oftentimes these depth charts will change from day to day or week to week. And so I wasn't too worried about that, although this injury could change that. Last year, he had a 3.1 yards per carry. That's very concerning. He's not good in the passing game. He's a guy that I'm not that excited about. Even if Darius Geis is out, I've got to shift my attention then to Samaje Perine, who last year struggled also, but he did have a couple good games, so he could be the guy that would fall there. If I look at Samaje Perine and where he's at, if Geis turns out to be injured for the year, I think Perine probably falls in what I call a running back 4. I'm not real excited about this guy, but once again, you can never have enough running backs on your bench in this sport.
Exactly. I like that. What sums it up? I don't know. I don't have much to say. Again, it was one of those things where I didn't have as much research prepped on those guys as I'd like to have, because you find out these things such at the last minute. Let's never film on a game day ever again.
Well, like you have to say, in fantasy football, you need to be flexible and willing to change. You can't be rigid. And so what we think today, what we think 3 days from now is going to change, that doesn't mean that we are double-minded. It just means that we're keeping abreast of new information. So
there it is, every running back in the NFC East. Let's finish this video out in the NFC West. All right, so first of all, I want to say let's finish this video out. This is going to be another like 20, 25 minutes. But this is a very simple division because of two guys by the name of Todd Gurley and David Johnson. Yeah, there's not much to talk about on those teams.
There really isn't. Which one do you want to start with? Arizona, Rams? I don't really
Let's
care.
start with the Rams.
Okay, so the Rams. So here's where I got my notes. Todd Gurley, Todd Gurley, Todd Gurley. This is his team. There's nothing more to say, okay? This guy's had 35 touchdowns in 44 career games. He had a bad sophomore year, chalked that up to Jeff Fisher and Jared Goff being a rookie. Last year, over 2,000 total yards, 19 TDs, he's 6'1", 227. This guy's a stud. I'm not going to get into a lot of it because we talked about this guy. He's good. He's getting better and better each year. He's actually not just good, he's great. And he's gotten more involved in the passing game. His receptions have increased from 21 to 43 to 64 last year. Subsequently, his yards have increased. His touchdowns have increased. This guy is really good. Plus, I love they got good weapons around him, which is going to deflect a lot of that attention. They're going to load the box at times. It's going to be hard to do, though, because you got Cooper Kupp, Woods, Cooks, and others there. I love Todd Gurley. Unless he gets injured, I don't think there's anybody to consider on this team besides him.
Exactly. If he gets injured, the two running backs to look out for are Malcolm Brown and John Kelly. Now, I didn't do an insane amount of research on them because I started to do my research and found, honestly, we don't know enough about them. One of the things we talk about is watch preseason to learn the value of players. Listen to news. Guys, if something happens to Todd Gurley after this point or whatever, we will find more information out. We'll look at their preseason games and we'll listen to what the coaches are saying, and then we'll tell you which one of those guys we want. But as of right now, it's one of those things where I can't evaluate talent I haven't seen. I can't evaluate stuff that, honestly, we don't have a lot of information on them. However, Rob, you're pretty thorough. Do you have anything on them?
You know, I didn't, because I just don't think there's any value there. In fact, I tell you what, some of these guys are there that are on the bench will develop. But if they were to lose Todd Gurley, I tell you what, they're going to bring some veterans in. There's some guys out there right now that aren't signed that would come in, they would bring in once again. This is Todd Gurley's team. I wouldn't even bother exhausting yourself with information. If there is an injury or development you need to be aware of, we'll do our research. We'll let you know who you need to look at on that team besides him. Don't waste your time.
Exactly. So now we come over to David Johnson on the Arizona Cardinals. Rob, remind us how fantastic he is when he's healthy.
Yeah, when this guy's healthy, he's got the nose for the end zone. This guy has got 32 TDs in 33 career games. He's got great hands, only behind Bell, Kamara, and Christian McCaffrey in that area. He had 80 catches in 2016. Last year, in the first game, he had 6 catches before he got injured. This guy's very active in the passing game. In all reports, he's fine. He's going to be ready to go week 1. I just want to read some things for you guys so you know how good this guy is in the passing game. Even if they struggle a little bit running the ball this year, it shouldn't matter. We'll get to their offensive line concerns in a second here. Quarterback Carson Palmer said just before Johnson had showed a mismatch potential with the 88 yards on 3 receptions versus Green Bay in a game. He's probably as natural pass catcher as there is. The Packers started with a linebacker in coverage. They switched to a safety and finally capitulated to a dime cornerback by the end of the game. During the blowout victory, NFL Films caught all-pro cornerback Tyrann Mathieu. How do you say his name?
Tyrann Mathieu.
Mathieu. I always get around Honey Badger. I just call him that.
Just the Honey Badger.
The Honey Badger.
Works.
There we go. Delighted in the observation, saying that Johnson is a bigger version of Marshall Faulk. That's a huge name to be included with there, right? Goes on to say that his receiving and ball skills are second to none. Cardinals general manager raved about him. I mean, probably the best receiving back I have seen. This guy is great. He set his goal. Okay, David said, my goal is to have 1,000 rushing yards and 1,000 receiving yards in one season. I think that's realistic. What do you consider? In 2016, he had 2,118 total yards. Broke that down, he had 1,239 rushing yards and 897 receiving yards. It's happened to other backs before. Roger Craig and Marshall Faulk have done it. I think he could do it. Concerns, his yards per carry down. They don't have a great offensive line. They had poor offensive line play. Now, they did a lot in the offseason to improve that. They drafted some guys. They brought some guys in. Concern, though, they just yesterday lost their starting center. So they had problems last year in the offensive line. They worked hard in the offseason to improve it. Now they lost their starting center. That could cause an issue for them. But he's another situation here that unless he goes down, none of them are worth really looking at as replacements. I looked at all the guys on there, did some research. None of them are that great. Last year, the best replacement when he was out was Adrian Peterson.
Yeah. That's really it. I guess maybe Elijah Penny is a guy that I have a hunch on if that happens, but it probably won't happen. Another situation of guys, if it happens, we'll do a whole thing on it. We'll do a post on it. We'll do a video on it. We'll do anything. We'll do tons of stuff on it. But right now, we're not going to waste our time giving you tons of information that probably won't matter.
Yeah.
Like, come on. We talk about you have to know like 250 players in the NFL. Very well to be a good fantasy guy. So we don't want to throw information at you on players that you don't need to know because you already have so much to know. But let's move on now. What about the 49ers? Again, I go back to the sentences I wrote. For me, the 49ers running back situation makes me feel like when you try to fix your car, you got a crack and you just duct tape it out the front. It's not great, but the 49ers are going to make it work. And that's what I feel like is Jerick McKinnon. He's never exceeded 159 carries in a season with Minnesota, and he's averaged only 3.59 yards per carry, which was, I believe, worse in the NFL among qualifying running backs with enough carries, including only 1.5 yards after contact, which was also second worst. He hasn't been great. He is a PPR specialist on 309 carries during the past, or excuse me, those numbers were on 309 carries during the past 2 seasons. But McKinnon's, his receiving volume is terrific. He's very efficient, 7.2 yards per reception. He's not bad in the passing game, but I like the Shanahan system. I think the Shanahan system could, like I said, use him very well. Like I said, I think he's duct tape, but for a few things, if you get the right coach, he could really be a good fantasy option, not great. But I know you have a lot to say on him. I'll shut up.
You know what? I don't have a lot to say. Jerick McKinnon, they really paid him to be the workhorse this year. Now, if Breida continues to improve and impress in camp, he can play a larger role. So I think Breida is somebody that you need to stash as a handcuff if you draft Jerick McKinnon, but I'll get back to him in a second. So let's look at Jerick McKinnon. So you look at McKinnon, right? So he was signed to a 4-year, $30 million deal. He fielded very nice last year for Dalvin Cook. Now, at this point, he's going to be given the opportunity. Kyle Shanahan came out and said McKinnon is going to be their starter, okay, the guy that they want to feature in that offense. Now, if you look at what Carlos Hyde did last year, okay, he had a huge boost in PPR. You look at last year, he finished 9th in running backs in PPR scoring. He averaged 17 catches per season, right, Carlos Hyde. Last year, that ballooned to 59 catches, just having the right system.
Mm-hmm.
So you take a guy like Jerick McKinnon, who already shown that he can catch the ball. He had 51 catches for the Vikings last year. You put him in that system, he could thrive there, okay? The one concern I have for him is that you look at Matt Breida. Matt Breida was somewhat successful. Last year, he ran well, had a 4.4 yards per carry. Now, he's smaller than Jerick McKinnon at 190 pounds, although Jerick McKinnon is not very big himself. And right now, there's some reporters that are covering camp. One reporter in particular named Grant Cohen came out and said Matt Breida has been a standout the first 3 days of camp. He praised on the second-year back going so far to become the best running back on the team. He lauded his consistency. He said that he runs harder than anybody else. The concern I have about Jerick McKinnon, I think Jerick McKinnon can thrive in that offense. I think his skill set matches Shanahan very well, but so does Breida. Breida is a smaller back that has got good hands out of the backfield also, so I think they could chip away at that. They might actually be equally effective and in the process hurt the both of them.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where I'm at. That makes me leery about both of them. And then there's a third guy in there. I thought about Joe Williams last year, who had some issues, came into camp, got injured, came out of shape, got in kind of the doghouse. But right now, he's actually the bigger of the 3 backs. And right now, he's in good shape. He's beginning to move his way. He's kind of their third running back at this point. He's somebody you need to keep an eye on, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So there it is right there. There's the 49ers running back situation. And the last team we have to cover, kind of a mess of a situation just a little bit, is the Seattle Seahawks. How do you feel about this sentence? I would say Chris Carson is the man right now.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Look at Seattle, right? Every running back situation matters in fantasy. You need to watch all the teams because you're going to need. And some of these guys right now that aren't maybe that high up on the list in terms of their average draft position are going to turn out to be a surprise as sleepers. So you need to watch every situation. But one, Seattle's got a weak offensive line. They have a bad defense that makes it hard for them to stick to the run. And I have a hard time seeing any of these backs as a running back 2 at this point. Even Chris Carson, who I'm starting to like, I've got to put him as a running back 3-4 at this point.
Yeah.
Now, exactly. A lot of people thought they drafted Penny, okay? But he's going to have competition from Chris Carter, who, by the way, Chris Carson.
They did. A lot of people thought they drafted Rashad Penny is because they did draft Rashad Penny.
Yes, thank you.
No, but
they dropped Penny. They thought they brought him in to become their starter, but right now, Coach loves Chris Carson, who added muscle in the offseason. They raved how well he looked this year and how great he did last year. Now you look at Penny, he's got deceptive bursts. What's concerning for me is he's got some skills that he brings to the table, but right now he's being used a lot in practice and special teams. That's something you do if he's going to be your starter. Then you also add in there McKissick, Procise, Davis, some other guys. This is a running back situation that besides Chris Carson, later on, I'm real leery about at this point.
Exactly. I like Chris Carson. Before breaking his leg in week 4, he had 208 yards and 49 carries. That's a fair 4.2 yards per carry on an impressive 2.14 yards after contact.
That's great.
I've been looking at yards after contact a ton lately, and I think that's a huge measurement for what a guy's able to do, accounting for the fact that an offensive line may not be that good. So I completely like that. He caught 7 of 8 targets for 59 yards. And I do not underestimate the concern it is that Penny's being used in the special teams. I cannot think of one solid starting player in the NFL that is also used in the passing game or in the special teams games a lot. Can you?
No.
I mean, can we really? No, we can't. That's a terrible sign. Like that means a lot, guys. It really does. That's another guy to continue watching, to continue looking for. As a rookie, he could turn around completely, and in 5 days, he could be the starter who looks fantastic. Who knows? As of right now, though, I'm not liking signs from camp about Penny. That's what I have to say right there.
Yeah, these are guys that certainly Penny and Carson I would own. I would definitely have on your bench. You can't ignore players like that. But these are guys, once again, like we said, a lot of other guys, I would not draft them depending on being your starting running back 1 or 2. You just can't do that. You put them on your bench as a running back 4 or 5, and hopefully they'll work their way up. Maybe one of those guys rises to the surface. I load my bench with running backs, knowing full well that some of them won't work out, but eventually maybe out of 3, 4, 5 guys, one of those guys will surprise for me, and all of a sudden I'll have a nice steal. That's kind of how I approach that position.
Exactly. I completely agree with you. There is every NFC running back you need to look out for right now. We're so excited to bring you guys the AFC video, but for now, that's all we have for you guys. Thank you so much. As always, leave a comment. God bless, and have a great day.